Hi everyone, welcome to 5-Quote Shakespeare Hamlet Theme Analysis. In this series we look at a total of 14 different themes, and in this one we'll look at Machiavellianism, the Dark Triad. What I do in each video is first identify the important aspects of the theme and apply it to the play. And then we dig deeply into the text and pull out several quotes that prove the connection. If you find these videos useful, please like and subscribe and share, and if you make a donation, you'll get a complete set of the PDFs I use in this series. See the description for details. We get the name Machiavellian from this guy. He was a Renaissance Italian political thinker, and he wrote a famous book called The Prince. In that book, he gave his king some great advice about how to be a good ruler. And he's the guy who famously said, "It is better to be feared than loved." So he was a very practical, rather cruel, hard-nosed political thinker. And in Elizabethan England, Machiavellian's political treatise, The Prince, was well known. And Shakespeare probably, we don't quite know for certain, but I would guess that Shakespeare had read that book. And the Machiavel had become a stock character on the stage at that time. So we do have, in a lot of Shakespeare's plays and other plays of the period, these characters that were called Machiavels. They were the sinister villains. We would just call them a villain today. The Machiavel had become a stock character on the stage, and in Hamlet there was one confirmed dark triad type. So I'm going to extend the definition of Machiavellian to include a more modern understanding of the villain, which would be the dark triad type, and I'll talk about that in just a second. So in Hamlet, for sure, Claudius is a Machiavel. He's a dark triad type. He's got all the characteristics of that kind of psychopath, narcissist, and Machiavellian. These guys, Hamlet, Gertrude, and Polonius, they're not quite Machiavel characters, but they do share a lot in common with Claudius, and we're going to break that down today as well. So just a little bit of history that I find kind of interesting. Evolving out of the morality plays, the stock character Vice, the Machiavels appeared in Coriolanus, Richard III, King Lear, Othello, Hamlet, and even Twelfth Night in a comedic form, because the Machiavel was very often depicted in comedic form as well. As a dramatist, Shakespeare was interested in depicting how of evil, how dark triad types operate, and the effects they have on people. Go back and watch Othello if you haven't, and you'll see a perfect villain, Iago. And Shakespeare was fascinated by the psychologies of these psychopaths and how they operated. It's very, very interesting. We do see today, of course, the Coen brothers films. If you haven't watched any of those, you should. You might have seen this one, No Country for Old Men. Well, that's the modern day version of the Machiavel, and he certainly contains these dark triad types, very, very psychopathic, narcissistic, and Machiavellian, which is the manipulation and deception. Just to go back to the morality plays were the medieval form of entertainment, and they came out of the Christian stories, and they were very simple. They were didactic allegories. They were trying to teach people something very, very explicitly, and the hero was the everyman. And if you see here, he's labeled as the everyman, which means all of us, and this guy is death. He's a personification of death, and you had personifications of other virtues and vices as well. And there was one, the Machiavel was actually called the Vice, or Old Vice, he was sometimes called. And Shakespeare would have been familiar with these morality plays coming, before his time, and we see elements of it in his plays as well, particularly the Machiavel. All right, so as I've mentioned, the dark triad characteristics are narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathology. And what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to mix all of these together and identify which ones apply to which characters. Shakespeare often uses parallel characters to emphasize similarities and differences in each, allowing for an exploration of human complexity and contradictions. That's absolutely true. Lady Macbeth and Macbeth are pretty much the same characters. We see it again and again. And we see it in modern storytelling as well. Spider-Man will meet the villain, and the villain will say, we're not so, or James Bond will meet his villain, and the villain will say, we're not so different, Mr. Bond, you and I, that kind of thing. So that's that parallel characters. And yeah, it makes for a more complex understanding of the human heart, the contradictions within the human heart, sure, and it is true, and Shakespeare does that a lot. Hamlet shares many of the qualities of these people, of the people he professes to despise. He hates Claudius, and he shares, as we're going to see, a lot of the same similarities. And the same thing he shares a lot in common with someone like Polonius. If you haven't read Catcher in the Rye, I strongly recommend it because Holden Caulfield is very much a Hamlet character, and one of the most obvious similarities is that they claim to hate all the hypocrisy in the world, and they're the biggest hypocrites themselves. Do you see? Okay, so let's look first at arrogance and grandiosity, which is a lot easier to find in Hamlet, interestingly, than it is to find in Claudius. So we see him here in Act 2. He's talking to Polonius, and of course he hates Polonius. And of course he's right to call Polonius a tedious old fool. That's not so surprising. We kind of cheer him on when he does that. But does it reveal a kind of arrogance? Yeah, it does, fair enough. But I would argue that that's a kind of necessary arrogance. The definition of the hero is the one who recognizes the wasteland, that everybody's behaving inauthentically. The world, there's something not right with the world, and I'm above it. DC. Now that's a form of arrogance. We don't like that. We don't like the heroes, by the way. We don't in real life. We like to watch them when they're Tony Stark on the screen, defeating arch villains. But in our everyday life, the person who stands out by saying, "No, you guys are doing it wrong. There's something wrong here. You're not being yourselves. I'm going to be something different." We hate that. We hate it. We take it down, you see. So that's the necessary arrogance of the hero. He's above this game. He's not going to play it, although he does try to play it, you see. Okay, but in other instances, we have this unnecessary snobbery, this unnecessary arrogance that reveals to me an uncertainty. So here he's talking to the players, and he's giving his opinion about what a good play should be. There's arrogance for you. You're telling an actor how to act, do you see? They're professional actors, and he's telling them how to act. So there's a bit of arrogance in itself. But more tellingly, he says, "I heard thee speak. I heard you guys perform earlier. I heard thee speak me a speech once, but it was never acted, or if it was, not above once. For the play I remember pleased not the million. 'Twas caviar to the general. So I heard you guys give a speech, and it was brilliant. It was so intelligent. It was so brilliant. But you only played it once because it wasn't popular. It didn't please the crowd, DC." Now it was like giving caviar to the general population. They don't appreciate it. The great unwashed didn't appreciate your brilliance. Now, is that untrue? Not necessarily untrue. It's probably true. Yeah, I mean, a great artist might have a vision that is grand, and they want to make this movie, but they know it won't sell a lot because there's not enough, sex and violence in it. So fair enough. That kind of attitude can be true. But that's another instance of this kind of snobbery. Now it gets worse over here, though, where okay, you might have a point here, but you know what? Let's have a look at this one as well. This is not very flattering on you, Hamlet. It reveals more of an elitist disdain than it does for a kind of the masses. They love a good fight. They love sex and violence. They love this kind of stuff. There's nothing wrong with it, as long as we can also have the other forms of higher entertainment. You see. So Hamlet complains again in a similar vein. He says, "Oh, it offends me to the soul to hear a robustious, periwig-pated fellow tear a passion to tatters, to very rags, to overact, and instead of acting in a subtle, intelligent, high artistic way, these guys are pandering to the mob," is what he's complaining about. They'd split the ears of the groundlings, for whom Hamlet has nothing but contempt, for the most part are capable of nothing but inexplicable dumb shows and noise. So these guys don't understand anything about art. I do, and I hate it when you guys pander to these guys. So there's an elitist disdain. It doesn't look good. So you take this and you put it together with these other things, and it's not a very flattering picture on Hamlet. Osric is a kind of Polonius character. He's a fool. He's an empty shell of a man, like Polonius, playing to the court. He's got no soul whatsoever. And so, yeah, fair enough. He deserves our disdain. But the bullying in this particular scene is very, very distasteful. Osric comes in and he says, "Your lordship is right welcome back to Denmark." And Hamlet immediately says, "I humbly thank you, sir." And then he turns to Horatio. He doesn't even know Osric yet, but he recognizes the type. He's the courtier type. And he says, "Dost thou know this waterfly?" He says dismissively to Horatio, and Horatio says, "No." Well, there's no patience here. There's no graciousness. When we look at somebody who we recognize flaws in, you don't have to come out like this and call the guy this waterfly. You can't. He doesn't even recognize Osric's tortured humanity. Do you see what I mean? There's no patience. There's no graciousness for someone who's trapped. He's got a job to do. He's been told by the king to come to Hamlet to tell him news about the fight with Laertes, do you see? He's a courtier. That's his job. So at once, we're kind of rooting for Hamlet and saying, yeah, you're the necessary hero. You're above all this. And if I were in your situation, I hope I would be above it as well. But at the same time, there's a bully in here. Now, I don't have the quote here, but if you watch through the rest of that scene, he's teasing Osric. He's telling, put your hat on, it's hot. And then he puts his hat on and says, no, take it off, it's kind of cold. So he's manipulating in a grotesque way poor Osric, who is just being tortured by this guy. So it's not really a good look. So there's certainly arrogance, and there's certainly a sense of his own grandiosity, Hamlet's own grandiosity in these particular examples. And it makes us not like him as much as we might like a humbler hero. Look at all the heroes we watch in our movies, like a Tony Stark or a Superman or something. They tend to be hero and generous to those that aren't as great and noble as they are, do you see? That's what makes a good hero, perhaps? Okay, insecurity, need for admiration, and envy of others. Now we get to the narcissism. The narcissist can't abide anyone else receiving attention. They will always find a way, or try to find a way, to turn the attention back to them and to make whatever your conversation is all about them, DC. We all know these types. We are all narcissists in a certain to a certain extent. And if you can become aware of it, you can make yourself a better person, and you can recognize it in others. And you can't keep all the narcissists out of your life because you would have no friends whatsoever. But we can weigh them, and you can say that guy's off the charts. That guy's pathological. I guess maybe that's what we're talking about here, a pathological narcissism, and it's certainly pathological in Hamlet's case, as we're going to see right here. So this is his soliloquy in Act 2, Scene 2, where he, after watching one of the performers perform really, really well about the speech of Hecuba, he when he's alone, he says, "Oh my goodness, that guy is so great. Why can't I perform as well as my job as well as that guy performs his job?" He sees. He says. And he says here, who calls me villain? Now, he's full of self-hatred and disgust, and that's part of the negative narcissism. It's not a sense that he doesn't truly believe that he's great. He puffs himself up in these ways to try to convince himself that he's great, but it's really founded on terrible insecurity and this need for admiration, and actually envy of others. You see, he's envying the actor, and he says here, what about me? What about me? He turns it around. You see, he makes it about them. He turns it around and says, what about me? That guy was so great. What about me? What about me? What about me? He says, who calls me villain? I'm so detestable. I'm such a weakling. Who breaks my pate? Who smacks me on the forehead insultingly? Who plucks off my beard and blows it in my face? That was a terrible insult back in those days. Who tweaks me by the nose and gives me the lie in the throat? Who lies right down to the throat? Who lies to me as deep as the lungs? Lies to me not from the throat, from the lungs. You see, who does this me? Dude, like no one's paying attention to you. It's worse for the narcissist to be not paid attention to than it is to be despised. A narcissist would rather be hated in a Machiavellian sense. It's better to be hated than ignored. Wow, think about that. He doesn't want to be ignored. He can't stand it. So he's imagining. He's imagining that he's fascinating. He's imagining that he's hated. Well, if you're to be hated, you have to be worth being hated for. Do you see what I mean? There must be something at least, interestingly, or that has some kind of energy if you're going to be hated and watched. You see, it's a total fabrication of his imagination that he turns that impressive performance from the actor back onto himself and says, everybody hates me. It's like, no, they don't. They're not even thinking about you. But the narcissist can't tolerate that. Even worse, this is even more pathological. And even Hamlet at the end of the play, he's shocked at his own behavior here. He doesn't know why. We don't know. This is what makes psychology so interesting, is that we don't know what motivates us. We think our head's in control, the intellectual, conscious self, but it's all of these weird feelings underneath that are actually motivating us. And this is one of those cases. At the grave site in Act 5, Scene 1, at the grave side of Ophelia when she's being buried, Laertes expresses his sorrow and grief for her, and Hamlet sees that, and he sees that Laertes is getting some attention, and he jumps forward and he bursts out of the bushes like a madman, really a madman, and he says, what is he whose grief bears such an emphasis? Who's being so emotional? In the same way that he looked at the actor and said, who is he to be so emotional when I'm not? What about me? What about me? Whose grief bears such an emphasis? Whose phrase of sorrow conjures the wandering stars and makes the stars stand like wonder-wounded hearers, and makes people stand like wonder-wounded hearers? And then he says, "This is I, Hamlet the Dane, Hamlet the King of Denmark." Oh my goodness! He feels like he's been upstaged by Laertes at a moment when he should be weeping for Ophelia. Do you see this? Now this is an argument for his actual callousness too, his absence of morality and callousness. Does he really love Ophelia? That's an open question, a very, very open question. And this is one of the proofs against his truly loving Ophelia. In the same way that we saw Claudius having no remorse for his brother, no thought for his brother, and no thought for the death of his wife, imminent death of his wife, and no reaction to the death of poor Ophelia. Do you see? In that same way, Hamlet is a parallel character. He has no reaction for the death of Ophelia. His only reaction is that, what about me? I feel her death more than you do, Laertes. He's a nasty piece of work, a very complex piece of work. Right at the very end, he has a grandiose exit, a narcissistic exit, and it is touching. We do have sympathy, great sympathy for the hero who's trying his best in a bad situation, who is terribly, terribly flawed, but we're still rooting for DC. Even at the end, he sees himself as someone who's fascinating and deserving of being watched. He says, "You that look pale and tremble at this chance." So he's dying. This is actually the scene here. He's dying, and he looks at the audience, his audience. He's on stage now. Everybody, all eyes are on him, which is what the narcissist wants. "You who look pale and tremble at my life, isn't my life fascinating?" DC. "That are but mutes or audience to this act." That mute means just an actor whose job is to stand on the stage and be a soldier or something like that and have no words. He imagines everyone in his life as being a supporting actor. Not even a supporting actor, just a prop. You are all props in my grand life, do you see? You are an audience member of my grand life. I am fascinating. "All of you who are but mutes or audience to this act, had I but time, oh, I could tell you. I'm going to die, but I don't have time to tell you." He sees himself as a leading man in a great, noble tragedy, DC, which is exactly what he is. So Shakespeare is playing with us here. Is Horatio an enabler in this case? Enabling the narcissist to see himself as a leading man, because throughout the whole play, Horatio is just watching. He's the character foil. He's just watching the hero, giving feedback to the hero. That's all he's doing, never judging the hero too harshly, giving the hero what he wants, giving the narcissist what he wants, that kind of attention. Yeah, that's another way to think of it as well. So Hamlet, we do have sympathy for him. He's a very interesting character. He's in a bad situation. But if you think that he's just this, if you think that he's only a noble hero, then you're really missing Shakespeare's point. All right, Machiavellianism, strictly the Machiavellian characteristics of deception, manipulation, absence of morality, and callousness. He tries to play this game, and I've kind of argued already that he is successful in the same way that he is a callous, remorseless kind of guy like Claudius. But no, the humanity pokes through that horrible his attempts to be a psychopath. He's not quite that. So let's have a look. Hamlet tries to be the good Machiavellian. He's attempting it. He becomes a student of the Machiavel here, but he's not quite successful. Not as successful as Claudius, that's for sure. But in terms of deception and manipulation, he gives it a good shot. He says the whole plot revolves around Hamlet's deceptions. It's true, the whole play. He has no power to openly accuse Claudius, and he doesn't trust the ghost, so he has to try to play the Machiavellian game. He must be cunning. He must learn to play the Machiavellian game, and in order to do that, he says at the very, very beginning, "I'm going to be a liar," is what he says. "I perchance hereafter shall think it suitable, shall think meet to put on antic disposition." So he's talking to Horatio and the other two characters, and he says, "Guys, I'm going to be faking it. I'm going to be faking insane to fool everybody at court until I figure out what's going on here." So he sets himself up immediately to be this kind of Machiavellian character. In his soliloquy, when he realizes how horrible Claudius is, he's amazed by it. This is the scene where he says, "Oh, villain, villain, smiling, damned villain." The naive, the naive, callow youth. He's a scholar, he's a philosopher, he's a poet, he's an actor, he's whatever he is. He's not a murderer, he's not a politician at all. But he tries to learn, and he says, my tables, my notebook, my mind, it is suitable that I set it down. I have to learn this lesson. He uses the language here of the schoolboy. In my schoolboy notes, I will write it down. I have to smile and be a villain. So that's his declaration. I am a student of the Machiavel. I'm going to try to be a Machiavel, to fight a Machiavel, DC. But his failure, of course, is that he's not that kind of character, and that's one of the definitions of tragedy. I think it's the definition of tragedy. It's when we don't know ourselves and we go against our own grain, and that's when we get ourselves into trouble. Okay, so there's the deception and the manipulation. Now, again, to the question of the absence of morality and the pure psychopathic callousness and absence of morality, it's hard to argue against that, but I kind of will. So here with Ophelia, of course, that terrible nunnery scene, he's absolutely brutal to her, and he says to her, I did love you once. Okay, now is he lying here? Indeed, my lord, you made me believe so. You should not have believed me, for virtue cannot so inoculate our old stock, but we shall relish of it. I loved you not. So now he's saying, no, you shouldn't have believed us. Believe me, because all human beings are corrupt, and my corruption will overpower my virtue. I loved you not. I was the more deceived. Very, very callous here, and it escalates, as you know. Go watch the nunnery scene again, and he is brutally, brutally cruel, and it's hard to find any redeeming feature or redeeming element in that particular scene. Is he lying? I've heard it said many, many times that he didn't love Ophelia at all. He just used her. Maybe he thought he loved her. They had an affair. I'm pretty certain that they have had sex, and that's one of the reasons why he's disgusted with her, because of his puritanical elements. And the fact that he's projecting onto Ophelia Gertrude's corruption, which is arguably quite corrupt. So he's projecting onto her his disdain for that the female version of that kind of corruption. But we don't know. Is he lying now, or was he lying back then? Did he love her? I suspect he didn't really love her. One day I think that he did, one day I think that he didn't. So I don't know. You put the evidence together and you try to figure it out. Okay, so here are the questions. Does he have that absolute lack of empathy? Regarding Ophelia, it seems like it. Is he absolutely remorseless? He kills his best buddies, Guildenstern and Rosencrantz, but there's evidence to suggest that he regrets that, so let's have a look at that too. One of the defining characteristics of the psychopath, of course, is an absolute lack of empathy, an absolute lack of remorse. They're incapable. They're biologically, there's something wrong with their brains, the way they were born, a lack of empathy. Now, my argument is that Hamlet has a lot of problems, and he's not a nice guy in many regards, but he's not that kind of psychopath. He does feel remorse. That's going to be my argument. So Hamlet behaves cruelly, but he is no psychopath. His problem, rather, is his narcissism and other personality disorders, which I talk about in other videos as well. Personality disorders, just Wikipedia it, and you'll see a whole list of personality disorders, and Hamlet has pretty much all of them. I think he's too sensitive for the hardball Machiavellian game. Now, if you're a true psychopath, you're not too sensitive for anything. You can witness absolute horror and just just shrug it off. Okay, so the first thing we have to address, we talked about Ophelia already, and if you want to make the case that he does lack empathy, then Ophelia is where you would go for that argument, I think, because he doesn't express a lot of remorse regarding Ophelia. For Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, he kills his best buddies, and Horatio kind of calls him out. He obliquely calls him out and says, dude, you killed your buddies? Really? But he's the enabler, and he says, so Rosencrantz and Guildenstern go to it, do they? They're going to go, you're going to have England kill them, are you? And then Hamlet reacts to that in a way that a psychopath wouldn't. A psychopath would just say yes, and that will be the end of it. But he doesn't. He has a defensive reaction here, and he over-talks. If a person who's defensive, they talk too much. A person who's lying talks too much. A person who has nothing to hide and a person who has no remorse would just say yes or no. So he says, why, man? They did make love to this employment. They brought it on themselves. They are not near my conscience. Really? Their defeat does by their own insinuation grow. They caused this themselves. He says the same thing twice, basically. And in the middle here, he says, I don't think about them. Well, yeah, you're thinking about them right now, and you're thinking about them more than you have to. You're thinking about them more than Claudius would, for sure, do you see? I think it's defensive. I think a psychopath wouldn't waste his breath at all. But there is a question here. Hamlet calls Claudius a murderer and a villain. So I put the question mark in here. Is Hamlet the murderer and the villain? Yes. He just sent his rather innocent, rather dopish, foolish buddies for whom he should have had some sympathy. As someone who is intellectually superior and in a superior situation, he should have had some kind of gracious sympathy for these buffoons, which is what they are. So we see it again here. So we see the lack of, we see a non-lack of empathy. So we do see a flicker of empathy here when he kills Polonius. He looks at Polonius when he shoots him through the curtains. You see, remember, all the murders that he does is at a distance. He's not a psychopath. He can't look someone in the eyes and stick a knife in their belly. He can't do that. He's not that kind of guy. So he kills Polonius through the curtain, and he says, thou wretched, rash, intruding fool, farewell, I took thee for thy better. He takes the time to say farewell. Now, would Claudius say farewell? No, he would just say, you're gone. Good. That would be the end of it. So there's a bit of that defense. There's a bit of that, a sad resignation rather than triumph. He doesn't say good and walk away. He doesn't shrug and walk away. He looks and he thinks, okay? And then he says this. So there's a flicker of that kind of humanity anyway. A psychopath is not human. That's what we recognize in a real psychopath. There's a lack of humanity. Now the mom says here, talking to Claudius, she says, Hamlet weeps for what he has done. Now she doesn't say for what he has done, it's for what is done. So that's a passive, a way to soften the blow, to try to take some of the blame off of Hamlet. And the mom might be lying to the king to try to protect her son, whom she loves very, very much. That's a potential, that's a possibility, and I can't say that it's not true. I suspect not. I suspect that he did kind of cry for the death of Polonius, because again, he's not a murderer, but I could be wrong on that. I really have no idea. Anyway, this is why we keep talking about Hamlet, because there's no answers at all. Okay, let's wrap up Hamlet with self-interest. Self-interest, of course, is one of the characteristics of the dark triad type, and Hamlet does have that. We don't see it very much. It pops up every now and then. He's supposed to be a noble hero in a noble pursuit of fighting for justice in the wasteland by getting revenge for the murder of the rightful king. So fair enough, he does do that. He has honorable reasons to seek revenge, but he's also driven by self-interest, and it makes itself felt in a few places in the play. He's not psychopathically. If he was a psychopath and he just wanted to be king, he would have maybe even acted. It might have been even better for him because he might have acted faster. So in this regard, he's kind of a failed dark triad type. He thinks too much and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so here we see it. This is one instance in Act 3, Scene 2. He's talking to Guildenstern and Rosencrantz, and he says, "Sir, I lack advancement, so I don't have my job. While the grass grows, the proverb is something musty." So this proverb it refers to a saying whereby the horse will starve while it's waiting for the grass to grow. So that's himself. That's the image of himself as the horse, waiting and waiting and waiting for the grass to grow so he can feed, so he can have his job. He can have he can take his proper place in the world. Do you see? So I lack advancement. That's a very clear statement of the fact that he's frustrated. He doesn't have the crown. There's no crown for the prince. He has his toy crown. He's still a boy. He hasn't become a man. That's what this play is about. It's about growing up and taking your rightful place in the world as a man. And of course, he doesn't have his crown. This is a brilliant shot of Hamlet during one of his soliloquies, sitting off of the chair because he doesn't deserve it. He doesn't have it yet. He's frustrated. No shoes either, so he's still a boy. Look at all the image of him as the boy. So there's that frustration. Again, he's talking to Claudius. And he says, "How fares our cousin Hamlet? How are you, Hamlet?" And this is just before the dumb show. This is just before the play that we're in. He'll catch the conscience of the king. And Hamlet is riffing. He's trying to put on his antic disposition. He says, "Excellent, in faith. I'm of a chameleon's dish. I eat the air. Promise crammed. You cannot feed capons so." So he's playing with words. He's teasing everybody, teasing the king. And he says, "I'm like a chameleon. I eat the air." So it was believed back in those days that the chameleon's tongue whipped out so quickly that they couldn't even see the fly. So they used to believe that the chameleon ate air. He's crammed with promises with potential, but he's unable to realize that potential, DC. So there's another instance of that evidence that he does have that sense of the frustrated ambition. So I don't know if that's not, certainly not pathological. That's very much understandable. He's, what, a 30-year-old man, and he's still in the position of being a boy, DC. So that's legitimately frustrating. But there's a little bit of overlap there with the self-interest of the dark triad type in Claudius. Okay, Gertrude, really, really interesting as well. Of course, she's not strictly a dark triad type, but she does share some of the characteristics. And that was 5 quotes Shakespeare, Hamlet theme analysis, Machiavellianism, dark triad. I hope you found it useful, and if you did, come back for my other videos and like and subscribe, and pick up a copy of the PDFs if you need them. Thanks for watching.